Hello, my name is Rhianna, and recently I finished Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson, and it has become one of my new favourite books of all time. And at different stages while reading the book, I decided to film my thoughts, so I thought I would compile that into a video and show you how I slowly fell in love with this book throughout the process of reading it. And so without further ado, here, let's start! So here's update 1 after the pre-prologue and the prologue. So this book has 2 prologues. The first prologue was a bit confusing initially because I had just entered into this world that I knew nothing about. What I got from it is there were 2 characters and they were on some kind of battlefield at the end of a battle, and they had to go their separate ways for some reason, and they left swords in a stone. And there were some other swords there because I think this is like, there are some other people who are like these. I don't know if they're like wizards or like godlike beings or something. Anyway, they put their swords in the stones and then they went in opposite directions. Then when the next prologue started, it was like 4,000 years later, which is just very epic. And in this prologue, we follow a guy called Seth, who is an assassin, and he's wearing white because that's like what these assassins wear, and he's trying to kill a king. And I really enjoyed the action scenes in this because I read a lot of literary fiction. It's been a while since I've read an action scene, and I really enjoyed listening to it. I really could imagine everything that was going on. It was really well constructed, and Seth has some kind of power which I can't say I fully understand yet. It's called Stormlight, which makes sense because this series is called the Stormlight Archive, and he can possess light and wield it in a way which makes things move. It cuts through rock and stone. I think I will come to understand it more as I continue to read. But so far, after the first 2 prologues, which is really nothing of the book, it's not even the first hour, I'm enjoying it. So yeah. So it's now Friday the 30th of August and I finished part 1 of The Way of Kings, which means I'm about 8 hours into the audiobook. So over the past 2 days, I listened to quite a lot of it and I love it. I think this is my favourite book that I've read in ages, and I just feel so immersed in the world and I love the characters. Kaladin, what a great character. So at the moment, what's he up to? He started out in an army and was a really good soldier, and then the next chapter we see of him, it's 8 months later and he's a slave, and then he ends up on these shattered plains, which is an area of war, and there's a big army encampment there, and he finds himself having to carry this bridge really far, and it's so emotionally and physically exhausting. And he then eventually arrives at this other army, the enemy army, and they have to put the bridge over this chasm so that their army can then go across the bridge and fight the other army. And most of the time when the people who are carrying the bridge die because the arrows are all shooting at them, and it's so just depressing for Kaladin. He's kind of lost his spirit, and at the end of part 1 we find him kind of regaining that spirit and being you know what, I need to remember who I used to be, and this is a terrible situation, but let's try to fight and not just give up. And I love it, that kind of thing. Then we also follow a female character called Shalom, and she has arrived in the city and she wants to become the ward of this scholar princess. And I thought this was interesting, but what made it even more interesting was that at the end of one of the chapters we discover that Shalom actually doesn't want to be this person's ward so she can learn more. She wants to become this person's ward so she can steal the soul cast that this person has, which is a powerful magical object, and her family used to have one, but theirs doesn't work anymore, got broken, the power was lost, and so she wants to steal it to regain her family's power and her family's status. And I really love her as a character too, and I think it pairs really well, Kaladin's storyline and Shalom's storyline, and I'm already getting attached to them even after the first part, and I'm so excited to continue reading. And I love this about reading, where you just feel so connected to that world, and it's so much fun. Hello, welcome. So today is Wednesday the 4th of September. I have been reading this book for about a week and I have now finished part 2. I'm about 20 hours into the audiobook and what else has been going on? So in part 2, we don't follow Shalom's storyline anymore. I believe that she will come back in part 3, but we are instead introduced to a new character called Dalinar. Now, I don't want to Google anything because I don't want to be spoiled. So my knowledge of Dalinar and his family is just from listening, and you think this would be enough, but it is a little bit complicated. So like some of the names and stuff I haven't quite got yet, but from what I understand, Dalinar is the brother of the king. The king was assassinated. He was the guy who Seth assassinated at the beginning of the book in the prologue, and now the son of that king who was assassinated is the king, and that is Dalinar's nephew. And Dalinar also has 2 sons of his own. The one that we see the most of is Adolin, and he is a pretty good soldier, also a bit of a womanizer, and also an interesting character. And Dalinar is kind of dealing with all these political things at the moment. So Dalinar has these visions, which we don't really understand. I don't really understand yet. I guess it's going to make more sense in the future parts of the book. He also is dealing with his nephew, who is the king, be suspicious of everyone. So because the king's father was assassinated, he believes that he might be assassinated too. So he's very suspicious of everyone, and that includes Dalinar. And Dalinar is also thinking that maybe he might step down from being like the High Prince and allow his son to take that title, because he's not sure that he is still like the man that he used to be. I think he is dealing with a lot of identity issues. There's also a character in connection to this called Sadeas. Sadeas is one of the High Princes. So I believe that if you are a High Prince in this world, you're sort of like the leader of a realm. I think like the leader of one of the important families within this world. And Sadeas is the leader of the encampment where Kaladin is. So there is a connection there. Sadeas isn't so nice, it seems. Bit of a dodgy guy. So we don't like him. Then alongside Dalinar, we also have Kaladin. We are following his storyline too, and he's become one of my new favourite characters of all time. I love a character who is in a very difficult situation, but is like trying to make the best of it and trying to really rise from the ashes of it. And that is what Kaladin's doing. He has become bridge leader, and he has like 30 people in his bridge team, and he's trying to make them a team and make them believe that their lives are worth living and that there's hope. And he's getting them to do like training together so they are better as bridge runners, and that they can work as a team and more likely survive. And this is causing Sadeas and Gaz, the like other person who runs this encampment, be very suspicious of him because they don't like that he's sort of going against their orders. So there is tension there. And so yes, I'm very excited to continue reading. I'm so like into this story. Every evening I've been listening to 1 or 2 hours of it, and it's my favorite part of the day. So yeah. So I'm wearing my raincoat because I'm just about to go and venture into the outdoors, but I've now finished part 3 of The Way of Kings, and I'm enjoying it so much. In part 3 we follow Kaladin's storyline, and we also follow Shalom's storyline. I've been calling her Shalom, but I feel like that's probably not exactly how I pronounce it, although it sounds like the narrator is saying that when I listen to her. I don't know. And Kaladin's storyline is that he's still working with the bridge crew, and he is really creating a sense of camaraderie. So all the bridge crew are really quite friends now, and Kaladin has 2 really close friends called Rock and Tuft, and I really love Rock. He's this big guy, but actually he has a really kind heart, and they have realised, well, Kaladin realised that their only shot of survival is to escape. Like if they stay in this situation, they're just going to die, because they have to run the bridge back and forth every other day, every other week. It depends how often they are needed, and they do this because the Parshendi try to get gems hidden in the Shattered Plains, and of course the Alethi also want to get the gem. So it's like it's a fight that is continuous, which is why they fight a lot. So Kaladin and his bridge crew are going to try and escape, and it's really stressful because I've got really attached to Kaladin and the bridge crew, and I'm hoping that they do manage to escape, and also that the escape happens within this book, because I don't want to have to like wait to book for book 2 for it to happen, because I will read book 2, but I might give it a bit of a break before I jump into it, because this book has kind of been taking over my life. And now I've just googled Shalom, the character, just because I wanted to see actually how her name is written, and it's written Shallan, so I think maybe her name is Shallan, but it really sounds like the narrator is saying Shalom, but let's call her Shallan. And Shallan is still working as a ward for her mistress, and her mistress is the sister of the king, so she's actually Dalinar's niece. I can't remember her name. I could Google that, but I'm trying not to Google anything. I just really wanted to know how Shallan's name was spelled. And Shallan decides to not steal the soul cast, because her and her mistress get along really well, and I love their scenes together and their relationship together. But then her mistress uses the soul cast for a purpose that is not, it's debatable whether it's correct or not correct. It's a it's a philosophical conundrum. And so Shallan steals the soul cast, but then she has a romance with this Ardent, and I thought it was really sweet. I thought they got along really well. But then the Ardent turns out that he was just trying to poison the mistress, and so he was just being nice to Shallan to get to the mistress, and he poisoned Shallan accidentally, and so in order to save herself she needed to tell her mistress that she'd stolen the soul cast, so her mistress could use the soul cast to protect her. And this book just feels epic. I'm in awe of how Brandon Sanderson has created a world that feels so real. I love writing, but I feel like I could never create a world that has this many intricacies and that just feels like a real place. And I love it a lot. I'm excited to keep reading. I only have like 12 hours of the audiobook left, so I should finish it soon. So I have now finished Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson, and it has become maybe my new favourite book of all time. So because I've already included spoilers, let me tell you what happened at the end. So Kaladin and Dalinar's storyline really converged. So what happened is Dalinar started working with another high prince called Sadeas, and they started working together against the Parshendi to get the gems faster, and it was working really well. But Sadeas, not a nice guy, he leaves Dalinar, his son Aladin, and their whole army on the Shattered Plain, trapped basically by the Parshendi, and then he gets out of there with his whole army, leaving Dalinar to die. But Dalinar did not die, and that is because Kaladin and his bridge crew were there. So Kaladin is part of Sadeas's encampment. He's a bridge crew for Sadeas. He doesn't want to be, but he is. And Sadeas and his army leave, and Kaladin's bridge crew are expected to follow on later on, because I think they have some wounded or something. And of course Sadeas doesn't expect Kaladin to help Dalinar, because that would be like suicide. Why would they help them? But Kaladin has like some superpowers. He can like absorb stormlight, and it makes him really powerful. I think he's like one of the Lost Radiants or something. I haven't still got quite a grip on the like history of this world, but he's some kind of powerful warlock being who can absorb stormlight. So Kaladin and his bridge crew, they put one bridge down, and they give Dalinar and his army a lifeline, really, and so Dalinar and his army can then escape, and they live. Now, because of this, Dalinar of course owes Kaladin his life, and there is a big moment, a standoff between Dalinar and Sadeas back at the encampment, where Sadeas says, "You can't take my bridge crew, they are my slaves, you can't have them, they belong to me," of course. And Dalinar of course knows that if he leaves Kaladin and his bridge crew with Sadeas will kill them, because Sadeas betrayed Dalinar, and he's saying that he didn't betray him. He said that, there were too many Parshendi, we had to leave, which of course is a lie. And so to get Kaladin, because Dalinar doesn't want to start a war, he wants to be a bit cleverer than that and a bit sneakier than that, Dalinar gives his shard blade, which is like a powerful like lightsaber in this world, to Sadeas. In return for Kaladin. So he's paid a big price to have Kaladin and the bridge crew safe in his encampment. And then he hires Kaladin basically as his protector, as his bodyguard, and his bridge crew are also involved in that. And that's where the story leaves off. And so that's where the story, I guess, will continue into book 2. And then we don't see much of Shallan and her storyline, but we are left with her and her mistress, because her mistress has forgiven her, because Shallan realizes that actually the power is coming from her mistress, not actually the soul cast. So, and also Shallan has this power too, which they don't really understand. It's a bit different to Kaladin's power, I believe. And I just love these three characters, and I think it's really hard to write a dual point of view story because you want the stories to feel connected, but you also want them to each have their like individual purpose. Like, why don't we just have one point of view? Why have we got these three point of views? And Brandon Sanderson does it so well. Like each storyline could be its own story, really, but together it just makes it so powerful and so brilliant. And I love it. I love this book. And if you've read it, let me know what you thought of it too. And I'll see you in another video soon. Bye bye.